Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Amanda Ziadeh with WashingtonExec, and today I'm joined by a member of government and industry to discuss securing air and space and the operational imperatives. So, with me today, I'll introduce Tim Grayson, Special Assistant to the Secretary of the Air Force, and Marty Whelan, Senior Vice President of the Defense Systems Group at the Aerospace Corporation. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. So I'd like to kick this off by briefly asking you both if you can describe your role, what you've been heavily focused on this year, and your top priorities. Tim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Amanda, and thanks for the opportunity to speak with you and your audience here. So I was brought in by Secretary Kendall back in January of 22, and I was just finishing up a tenure at DARPA as the Director of Strategic Technologies Office. And he had me sold at hello because he described to me his operational imperatives. And I'm sure we'll be talking more about the operational imperatives, but they embodied pretty much everything that I've been trying to accomplish, both in terms of capabilities as well as the business model around them. So very exciting opportunity. So since January 22, I've been supporting the Secretary on how we actually develop and implement these operational imperatives that we'll talk more about.
Wonderful. And Marty, a bit about your role.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Since the Secretary of the Air Force issued the operational imperatives, aerospace has been really assisting our customers, both Space Force and Air Force, as they architect their contribution to each of these imperatives. As a predominantly space company, you can imagine we're certainly more focused energy and specifics on the space related OIs, but each of the OIs has a space component to it. So that's where we've been focused in our efforts. Our immediate focus is to ensure the blue space order of battle. Architectures for systems that are resilient and can withstand any kind of crisis, conflict, battle that we may have to absorb, but also looking at the protect and defend capability. How do we ensure our systems can last as the adversaries take efforts to deny, degrade, or defeat our space systems? So we work with our government customers. We've been working, as I mentioned, on the space order battle, but also the ABMS, Moving Target Indicator, and strategic deterrence, OI specifically. And industry is pretty good at developing capabilities once they know what the vision is, and the OIs have been very helpful charting the course for us.
All right, wonderful. Thank you both for that brief introduction. So let's dive into those OIs. Tim, what are they? Why are they? How are they? And what are the outcomes of the OIs thus far?
Yeah, so the origin of them were a vision that Secretary Kendall had when he came into office, that when he looked around, we have an incredible air and space force, but we were on a very sort of linear evolutionary path for modernization. And when he looked at that, he said, we need to figure out how to, innovation speak, break the S curve. How do we jump to something that's a completely new way of conducting warfare, specifically focused at the mission of deterring and, if necessary, being able to defeat a peer adversary. And he's been pretty vocal when he gives his own public appearances that his three priorities are China, China, and China. So the OIs were really created to create the set of capabilities that we need to be able to prevail in that kind of a peer conflict. The teams were originally set up. This is a very key, important element to how we've run the operational imperatives. It's an operations lead as well as a capabilities lead. So many of these things that are so-called innovation activities are all about tech-driven, or what's the next big tech idea. This is more about solving an operational problem. And by bringing those two parties together, there can be as much innovation on new operations concepts as there is new technology, but neither constrains the other by having a preconceived notion of what's possible or what's allowed. So that's been really powerful to help solve these problems. Marty alluded to some of them already in terms of a resilient space order of battle and more agile command control and communications, moving target engagement at scale, autonomous aircraft tied to an NGAD family of systems, protecting our forward bases, making our operations more resilient. Those are the kinds of problems we've been working. So what's been super exciting, and there have kind of been two major distinct roles now to my responsibilities. The initial set of operational imperatives, which are really focused on the FY24 budget development process, this is back in 22, are now starting to come to fruition. We did have to wait an extra 6 months or so with the continuing resolution, but we have gotten our 24 appropriation. So there was a total in 24, and this is if you look across the 5-year plan, of close to $40 billion that the Air Force is reprogramming, and new money that's come in from OSD and Congress oriented toward these modernization capabilities. So it's really exciting now to see the resources show up and these start to turn into real programs. So we've got one set of activities right now that's making sure that the programs are executing aligned with what that original vision was. And so many of these things are new and different. And then in parallel, we're still continuing the study process, because a lot of these things were either one piece of a broader story, or we're learning more as we go along, or we just need to refine and build out capacity of something. So we've continued to put additional OI recommendations, a little bit less into FY25, because the whole DoD kind of hit pause a little bit with the Fiscal Responsibility Act that kicked in 25. But we're very optimistic that we're going to get another big bump toward these modernization activities in FY26. A little bit premature to talk about the details of what's in there, but very excited about what's happening on the continuing the acceleration toward these modernization capabilities.
Great. Thank you for giving us a bit of background on those OIs. So, Marty, what is the industry's role in the Air Force's operational imperatives, and how do they relate to you and your current position and what you and your team are focused on?
Well, all the operational imperatives require a strong partnership between the Department of the Air Force and industry. And so neither can do it by themselves. In its simplest form, the vision and the funding come from the Air Force, but generally they don't bend metal or write code on any kind of large scale. So the industrial base delivers the hardware, software that take the vision and architecture and try to put that into action. But mission capability takes both working together to field and integrate this into a cohesive kind of capability. In my role, I'm at a federally funded research and development corporation, so we don't make the product, but we help the Air Force and the Space Force with deep technical analysis, and that's the basis for the architecture. The Space Force puts together a vision to get after these imperatives. And then along with the industry partners, we bring the knowledge of the space environment, the physics of space, and remember, the physics in space are different than the physics outside of our atmosphere. So we have to work through that. And we develop a reference architecture. And that kicks off a number of programs that need to be fielded, trained, and operated by both the Air Force and the Space Force. We then work with the program office. Now that you know what it is you want to build, we work through the program offices with the industry partners and help field that capability that was envisioned. That way you don't lose something in the communications process. And what you started out to buy is different, and what you buy are different. We're trying to keep those as tightly coupled as we can. And then we take that capability that was envisioned and bring it to the operational community to test, train, and operate.
All right. So to add a bit of context, Marty, can you briefly describe with us the changes to the DoD security construct, and how do those relate to the optimization for the Great Power Competition?
Very, very good question, because that's been something we wrestle with for many years. The security construct in Department of Defense was developed to protect technical and operational capabilities of the U.S. From being exploited or defeated by adversaries. So while imperfect, it's proven to be effective over the years. But what we're finding is that there's unintended consequences And some of those include limiting ourselves from communicating amongst ourselves or collaborating within companies and collaborating across companies. So the result is the customer, both the Air Force and the Space Force, have to become the prime integrator. And Tim, no offense, but the system isn't totally set up to reward integration at that level. And so if we optimize for great power competition, we need to find a path that gets through those barriers that are there and have to be knocked down in order to work a system that can be functional in competition and crisis and conflict, so across the whole spectrum. To their great credit, OSD leadership has taken on a task of lowering the barriers while still maintaining the security that is needed and allowing the competition that our contracting rules require. So DepSecDef Hicks has driven changes into OSD policy. The Honorable John Plum in space policy has been driving changes in policy to reduce the number and complexity of special access programs that the community works. And then Major General Abba in the OSD SAPCO established a new policy that allows limited but effective access. So within a company, the air, the ground, the space components within a company can actually be accessed to the compartments that allow them to integrate. That provides a greater solution within a company. The challenge now remains, how do you work across the company? So for one big industry partner to be cleared into the programs of another industry partner, they remain, but they are coming up with a process. The next step is to reduce those barriers to allow that to happen. And General Abba and the OSD SAPCO office have taken that on and are trying to allow greater flow of information so that the industry partners can bring a solution to the government instead of two independent problems that the government has to integrate.
I see. So, Tim, kind of building on Marty's response and explanation there, how does the optimization of the great power competition support perpetuating the OI process and improving capability development and modernization?
Yeah, so the specific activity, that term is a general term, but it means something specific to us within the department. So this was an initiative that Secretary Kendall first started talking about a little over a year ago. The announcement that we were going to go do this deep study on great power competition was announced back at AFA in September, and then a series of 24 recommendations was rolled out at the Air Force Association big convention in Denver in February. Now, a lot of those were in different categories. For instance, bolstering how we do personnel, career and leadership development. A lot of things on the operational side of how operational units are going to be organized and generate forces and provide readiness. From my vantage in the OIs, there's a complete sort of restructuring of how we're going to go about doing what we call capability development. So this is the whole process of how we identify what we actually need, how we turn those into program definitions, and then how those then get resourced. And actually, when the money shows up, turned into acquisition, execution. Within GPC, the Great Power Competition organizational work, there have been a number of new organizations that are being created. Like, for instance, on the Air Force side of the department, we have creation of the Integrated Capabilities Command, which is going to integrate a lot of the requirements process from across all the different MAGCOMs and provide a singular command that's focused on how we do capability development and modernization. Similar kind of organization on the Space Force side that I know Aerospace has been very heavily involved in. Space Futures Command will be there in analog on the Space Force side. Similar kind of organizations being created on the acquisition side of the world. Again, that model of operator coming together with capability developer. What we're doing from an operational imperative perspective is, even before the Secretary started talking about GPC, I was looking at the reality of everything we've been doing with the operational imperatives has been an ad hoc pickup game. I like to say, somewhat tongue in cheek, there is one person in the whole entire department who has OIs as a full-time job, and he's talking right now. Everyone else had some other responsibility and has been doing this as additional duties or as their assignments. So what we're doing, and as excited and proud of I've been of what we've accomplished, we can't make something that's purely ad hoc and personality dependent. So what we're creating under GPC is a new organization at the secretariat level called the Integrated Capabilities Office. And this is essentially going to be a small group of people, only about, order of magnitude 15 people total, whose job is going to be full-time job to go do operational imperatives like things. We're changing some of the names. They're campaign teams, not operational imperative teams, but it's the exact same model. Build an ad hoc team, solve a very specific operational problem, bring operators and capability technical people together, work with the people who have to build a budget to get that integrated, analytically backed set of priorities integrated into a budget, but have something that is a focal point for that kind of thing. I call it the advocate for the new. It gets back to this thing. If we've got an existing program office, an existing requirement sponsor, the department's been working great at how we get those things resourced and do the modernization and get the next generation capability in place. We haven't done such a great job of saying, here's a radically new way of fighting, or here's a radical new technology that could be a big breakthrough. This ICO office we're creating is going to provide the advocate for those kinds of things that don't have an existing stakeholder, so that they can at least, I'll say, see the light of day in the resourcing and the budgetary and the programmatic decision process. And in a sense, also be, I'll say, almost a proxy for some future secretary who, again, not relying on personalities, may or may not be a Frank Kendall driving this kind of thing.
I see. So, Tim, what challenges remain, or top challenges remain during this process, and how can industry and government work together to address those?
So we certainly are still constantly discovering, additional problems that we need to be working from operational imperatives. And like I said, that, we do have new things coming in from in our POM 26, and we're continuing those studies. We've identified additional topics that are going to be perpetuated under this new ICO construct. Some examples on the capabilities end of things. Marty alluded to this a little bit already, but we're very focused on both. How do we ensure we have very robust long-range kill chains? And then how do we start developing capabilities to be able to degrade any long-range kill chains the adversary would be able to go field? We're looking at supporting activities in munitions. A very important one, again, that aerospace has a lot of history in, is getting resilient position navigation and timing. Is a really super important one that we haven't done enough in yet. So that's a snapshot of some of the additional new topical areas. I would say, though, in terms of the hard work still to be done, one, we've got to be able to perpetuate this, again, beyond personalities. When Secretary Kendall is gone, when I'm gone, when some of the other people on the teams are gone, we want to, it's going to be a challenge to maintain the model and the behaviors and the culture that we've been able to instill in the OIs. And a big part of that is going to be industry. I really applaud what aerospace and some of the FFRDCs have been doing, working on sort of building an industry consortium. And the challenge I would toss out, but both for Marty to think about, as well as any, one on in industry who's listening to this. I don't think we've done a good enough job yet of describing the problems. We're trying to drive this culture change of saying, don't just wait for a set of requirements and then build something, or or worse, kind of figure out how your IRAD aligns with something that someone puts out there as a requirement. Be more proactive. Think about, here's what the actual customer warfighter problem is. How do we solve it? How do we put ourselves in the warfighter's shoes and solve the problem? And I think if we unleash industry on that, we can get incredible benefit. And the challenge we have, and it's largely on us, but we have to figure out a way to describe that. Part of it is the security limitations that you were, talking a little bit about earlier. some of it is just really hard to capture, these abstract concepts of what is an operational problem without turning it into some laborious spec sheet that again loses the problem solving ethos. So that's something I'd really like to see us do a better job at, and I'd love to hear, from industry of ideas about how we can do a better job of that. And again, applaud what aerospace and some of the other FFRDCs have been doing to try to help form that bridge.
Yeah, and Marty, feel free to respond to those comments by Tim as well, and maybe are there any collaborative or partnership type initiatives in place that industry is working on?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I guess my first response to Tim is, as a part-time practitioner and not a full-time practitioner of the OIs, I have appreciated the hard work that's gone into that. So I appreciate your challenge or charge to industry about getting beyond the requirements and really get after solving the problem. So that does create a little bit of a conundrum because you want to be responsive to the contracting officer, and that's a minimum requirement if you're going to win. But you also realize that you want to solve a bigger problem. So there's some dialogue that's going to have to take place between industry and the government, and we can do that. So as far as partnerships and collaboration, first credit goes to where it belongs. It has been happening for years. The government and industry have been working together, and they'll continue to work together. But we see a growing need for consortiums that work across the seams. Right now we have the way we contract thing. You tend to contract with a prime and you stay within your silo, and you have multiple silos. And the great integrator is the government having to knit those things together. And for good reason, those barriers are put in place both to protect competition. As I mentioned, for security, you don't want to hemorrhage. If there's a problem, you don't want to hemorrhage everything through one particular place. So those business and security barriers are in place really to enhance the competition and protect our nation. But well-intentioned, they do create a problem and make it impossible for a single contractor to stitch the whole enterprise together. Now, DAF RCO many years ago came up with a consortium that got after a common language, a common interface, and a common security environment that stitched together command and control for UAVs and UASs. And that's a good model because they found a way to get the industrial base all involved, to share openly, and to police themselves, quite frankly. And that tended to work. So building on that model is a good way to go forward. And I mentioned before, OSD SAPCO got involved in modified rules that allow different industry partners who might have special access programs to talk amongst themselves. So within Lockheed Martin or Northrop or BAE, you name the company. I don't have any favorites, so if you weren't named, I meant to name you. But allows them to communicate amongst themselves, which hasn't always been the case. But still remaining is how are they able to communicate and share information while honoring the security rules that they've signed up to contractually. So you don't have, you don't just share classified information with people without the permission of the government. So we're working on a way to do that. And I'm happy to say that aerospace, along with our FFRDC partner MITRE, are working together to develop a consortium that could be this integrating engine for space. And we've had great response from industry partners, and great credit goes to the folks in aerospace and the folks in MITRE who are working together to deliver a solution to the government. We're not there yet, but we have great support out of the Space and Missile Systems Center, out of the Department of the Air Force, and out of the OSD as well. So I think consortiums is a new tool that we're going to have to find a way to use, and the security rules changes allow those consortiums to better coordinate amongst themselves.
All Wonderful. Well, to close, I'd like to ask you both, what's next as the Air Force works to achieve these OIs, and what are you excited about looking ahead, including some of those consortiums? But um, uh, Tim, we'll start with you there.
Yeah. So first of all, probably most importantly, I'm excited to see the resources actually start showing up, and they're going to be starting to turn into new programs very quickly. And I think one clarification as we wrap up, a lot of times people in industry still get a little bit confused about, okay, well, where's the RFP for OIs? Or where's the budget line for OIs? And that's not the point. I mean, this has been a study process to identify what these things are and then turn them into real programs. And like I've emphasized, it's not innovation for innovation's sake. It's innovation to solve real critical problems. So that process is going to be continuing. I can't, tell you specifically what the next big challenge is that ICO will go try to tackle with its partners. But I am excited to think that organization will perpetuate this mindset. And the last thought I'll kind of leave you with, because Marty kind of sort of triggered it in his last statements. Again, in the spirit that while OIs have not been innovation for innovation's sake, and we certainly haven't been, I'll say, yet another, acquisition reform or programmatic innovation organization. I think one of the byproducts that I've been super excited about, I think I'm expecting to see a lot more happen here as well, is as the OI resources have been showing up, because they are so different. And again, some of the space architectures are a great example of this. It's stimulating thinking about completely new business models. Yeah, consortiums are one of them. Potentially service-based type acquisition of actual real hardware and real technology. That could be another one. So I can't tell you for sure exactly which way this is all going to pivot, but I think what's exciting is it's really opened that aperture and started giving maneuver room for that partnership between program offices and requirement sponsors and then the industry partners to be able to have a lot more maneuver room than our very traditional business models we've been following. So I'm very excited about what the future has to bring on that.
And Marty.
Thanks, man. First, let me start with what excites me the most is that this is all written down. So let's compliment the Secretary of the Air Force and Tim Grayson for writing this down and creating a digestible vision that we can all work on. They've taken the time to develop the vision that our nation and our industry can focus on and achieve. So thanks, Tim, and thanks to Secretary Kendall for doing that. Second, I'm excited, and I've said it a few times about the progress made by the security team that got beyond admiring the problem and getting out after knocking down some of the barriers. And while it's imperfect, and it will remain imperfect because it is a big bureaucracy, they're moving in the right direction. So kudos to all of them. I'm excited about the way we're trying to bring in commercial and international partners. That's especially on the space side. That's a new thing. I mean, when I would go downrange to Al-Udeid and I'd see tail flashes of multiple nations who are contributing to a coalition fight. And then I come back into the space community, and if it doesn't say USAF on it, we didn't integrate it. We're doing better now. So the Department of the Air Force, both the Air Force and the Space Force, are doing better, and that's exciting to bring both commercial and international partnership. And then finally, I'm excited to see how responsive industry has been towards these consortium-like things. They don't hunker down and say, how can I keep my secrets secret and how can I make more money? They truly are about solving the nation's hardest problems. And so compliments to the industry partners who are competitors, no doubt about it. But ultimately, they enjoy the freedoms that are provided to us by the United States military. And so they enjoy working together to solve those problems. And that's really exciting to me.
Well, thank you both so much for joining me today, for talking through these OIs and what they mean, their importance, and of course, how industry and government are working together to put those in place and move towards those. So we look forward to seeing that process evolve. And I appreciate you both being here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.